Welcome to the Despicable Me Explainer series. Today, we're looking at AIPAC, the unregistered foreign agent hijacking U.S. democracy. We're going to dive deep into how it operates, the eye-watering sums of money involved, and the massive controversy swirling around its role in American politics.
First, we're going to take a look at how AIPAC operates, and then we're going to get into the discussion. So let's get right into this.
Okay, let's just start with a number that's, it's pretty hard to wrap your head around. $100 million. According to our sources, that's the jaw-dropping amount the pro-Israel lobby AIPAC and all its affiliates are planning to spend in this election cycle. And here's the kicker. This isn't just random spending. The reports we're explaining say this mountain of cash is almost laser-focused on one thing: Democratic primaries. And the goal? Well, they claim it's to take out any candidate who dares to criticize Israeli government policy. It's like trying to reshape the party from the inside out long before most people even start paying attention. So that leads to the big question, right? Who is really behind this tidal wave of cash, and what is their ultimate endgame? We're going to peel back the layers on this massive political machine to see how it works and what kind of impact it's really having. All right, Section 1. Let's go inside the influence machine. You see, to really get a handle on AIPAC's power, you have to understand its structure. And the sources we've looked at describe it as this really complex and, they argue, pretty deceptive system for pulling the levers of power in Washington. Think of it as a three-part operation. First, you've got AIPAC itself, the classic lobbying group. These are the folks walking the halls of Congress trying to shape laws. Then there's the AIPAC PAC, which is the arm that writes checks directly to campaigns. But the real heavy hitter? That's the United Democracy Project. It's a super PAC, which means it can spend unlimited millions on ads, and boy does it, often unleashing these brutal attack ads on anyone they target. 3 different arms, all working towards one single goal. Now, here's where the strategy gets really interesting, according to these sources. They say the ad campaigns are basically a smokescreen. The ads almost never ever mention Israel. Nope. Instead, they'll hammer a candidate on local issues, on their character, on anything really, just to sow doubt and drag down their numbers, all without showing their true hand. And does this strategy work? Well, the sources say, just look at the receipts. In New York, a staggering $14.6 million was dropped to defeat Jamal Bowman. In Missouri, more than $9 million against Cori Bush. In Oregon, a last-minute ad blitz took out Sushila Jayapal. The point being made is that these aren't just abstract numbers. This is money being used to successfully remove specific voices from the halls of Congress. Okay, Section 2. It turns out this is about way more than just campaign checks. According to the source material, AIPAC uses a whole playbook of tactics to build loyalty and make sure everyone in Congress stays in line. So how do you build that kind of rock-solid consensus? Well, sources point to a few key strategies. You've got these all-expenses-paid trips to Israel for members of Congress. Then there are the fly-ins, which are basically coordinated swarms of activists brought to D.C. to put direct pressure on politicians. They also lobby hard for specific laws like anti-BDS bills, and apparently even brief Congress with talking points straight from the Israeli military. It's a full-court press. And you don't just have to take our sources' word for it. Listen to this quote from Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She says Israel has an incredible influence and control over her colleagues that she's never seen from any other country. I mean, that's a pretty stunning statement about the sheer power of this lobby, and it's coming from someone on the right. So all of this, the money, the ads, the trips, it all leads us to Section 3. The big, thorny legal question at the very heart of this controversy. Should AIPAC have to register as a foreign agent? So what the heck is FARA, anyway? It's actually pretty simple. The Foreign Agents Registration Act is just a transparency law. It doesn't stop anyone from lobbying for another country. All it says is, hey, if you're acting on behalf of a foreign government, you just have to put your cards on the table. You have to disclose who you are, what you're doing, and who's paying for it, so the American people know what's what. And believe me, this debate is not new, not by a long shot. Way back in 1962, AIPAC's predecessor was actually ordered by the Justice Department to register as a foreign agent. Then, poof, the very next year, the organization is reborn as AIPAC. Critics say that move was a deliberate dodge to get around the law. And with spending now at an all-time high, those calls to register are getting louder than ever. So the whole fight really boils down to this. AIPAC's position is, hey, We are an American organization funded by private American citizens for a strong America-Israel relationship. But the critics fire back and say that's just a technicality. They argue that if your entire mission and all your priorities perfectly align with the interests of a foreign government, well, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a foreign agent under the spirit of the law, no matter where the checks are coming from. All right, Section 4. Now you might be thinking, is anyone actually fighting back against this? And the answer is yes. For really the first time, a real counter-movement is starting to bubble up in Congress. And we're not just talking about a few politicians grumbling here and there. This is a formal, organized pushback. A whole coalition of progressive groups has launched the Reject AIPAC campaign to get candidates to publicly swear off AIPAC's money and support, and to just generally raise awareness about all this. And it's gaining some serious steam. You'll definitely recognize some of the heavy hitters who are jumping on board and publicly rejecting AIPAC. We're talking about Senator Bernie Sanders and representatives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib. A whole caucus of dissent is forming right there on Capitol Hill. Because what we're really talking about here, it's much bigger than just one lobby group or one country. It gets at some really fundamental questions about the health of American democracy itself. The core argument from critics goes something like this. When one single issue group can drop $100 million to basically fire democratically elected officials, it completely warps our political system. It creates what they call a chilling effect. It makes other politicians terrified to speak up or step out of line because they know they could be the next target. And when that happens, you effectively shut down any real honest debate.
Well, that's a good general overview. Now let's take a look at what happens when somebody speaks out against them.
What was it like from your perspective? I mean, you're home, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Did this start with a knock on the door? Was it a phone call? Was it a pounding? What actually happened last night from what you can tell us?
Yeah, and I'll be happy to go through detail by detail. So I was sound asleep. Of course, never expected anyone to be coming to my house at that time in the morning. Heard some knocks on the door, heard my doorbell, saw some lights outside, heard people outside my windows in my yard. And I jumped out of bed, threw my clothes on, and I picked up my gun. That was my instinct because I'm a gun owner. I'm a Second Amendment supporter, and I believe in defending myself. And normally I answer the door with a gun, especially if it's someone that I don't expect coming to my home. But for some reason, I had this weird gut instinct to not take my gun with me to the front door, which was very out of norm for me. So I put my gun down and I just went down the hallway, and the house was still dark. And I came around the corner and looked out the windows, and there I saw the police outside, and they had their guns. They were ready because they had received a terrible phone call to the 911 center. And so I walked up there and I saw them. I was really startled, and I couldn't think, like, why are they here? Did something bad happen? That was what I was thinking. I thought maybe someone had been hurt or killed, and they were coming to talk to me about it. And I opened the door, and the officer standing there, he said, "Ma'am, are you okay? Is everything okay here?" But it was the body posture of the police that was really concerning me. Like, it had me I was upset. I was afraid. I was like, there's something terribly wrong. And I said, yeah, I'm okay. I was sleeping. I'm like trying to understand what they're doing. And he said, hold on, let me get my sergeant. And then they came from around the corner and came up the steps and told me that someone had called in to the 911 call center here in Rome, Georgia, and had reported that someone had shot they said either her husband or her boyfriend 5 times in the chest in a bathtub. And then they were sending the police to supposedly go help. But then they called back a second time and said, there's children in the home. So with those phone calls, they were setting up a very serious, dangerous scenario in a home, right? And police officers, when they get those kind of calls, they know what they're going into. They have to be prepared for it. They have to get there immediately. It sounds like they made it sound like there were children in danger at our house. And so the police officers, they got to my house so fast. But then I said, no, this is all wrong. I said, come inside. I brought them inside. I said, they said, yeah, we realize what's happened is you've been swatted. And they were upset, rightfully so, and angry. And I was very upset. I could not believe someone would do that. And I was shocked because not only did they put my life and my family's life in danger, they also put the police officers' lives in danger. And so whoever this person is, they deserve to be locked up.
We got to talk about AIPAC attacking you, sending out fundraising emails saying that you are not acting in the interests of our country. Marjorie Taylor Greene, your reaction to AIPAC's fundraising emails attacking you?
Yeah, Matt, I'll go ahead and be straight and honest about this. I'm absolutely furious. And as a matter of fact, AIPAC needs to register as a foreign lobbyist because they're breaking U.S. laws by donating to members of Congress and by taking them on a fully funded trip to Israel every single freshman member of Congress's year. They just took them over just recently and had them meet with the Prime Minister of Israel. But let's frame that correctly. They take them over to meet with the secular government of nuclear-armed Israel. Israel, who is in less than $400 billion in debt. Israel, who has taxpayer-funded health care and college. Israel is not hurting, and they've already proven that they are more than capable of not only defending themselves, but annihilating their enemies to the point of genocide. And that's what's happening in Gaza. And Matt, the reason why AIPAC is attacking me is because I dared to tell the truth. As a matter of fact, I've been saying America first for a long time, but I'm getting to the point of saying America only. And I'll tell you why, Matt. It's because pretty much if you're under the age of 40, you have no hope for the future. We're $37 trillion in debt. People can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford rent. They can't afford insurance. They can't afford their bills. And we have HB1 visas stealing all these American jobs. And I'm sick and tired and fed up with it. But listen, if AIPAC wants to come after me and accuse me of betraying my American values, AIPAC, you know what? You can bring it on. I am totally ready for this. And this is a fight that I will fight and I will give it my all. And I can guarantee you, you're going to lose because America is fed up, Matt. They're fed up to here with funding foreign wars, funding foreign causes, funding foreign countries for foreign reasons that have nothing to do with Americans, while Americans work their ass off every day and pay their taxes and come home and they're living paycheck to paycheck and their credit cards are maxed out. I don't care anymore. I honestly don't care. So I'll burn this bridge to the ground and I will let the flames light the way. And because this is a fight that needs to happen.
Is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
Just to simply announce today, we're going to change our whole approach to arms exports rather than go through our careful process. It would strengthen Hamas. It would make a hostage deal less likely. I don't think it would be the right approach.
Will Israel take control of all of Gaza?
We intend to, in order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel. That's what we want to do. We want to liberate ourselves and liberate the people of Gaza from the awful terror of Hamas.
Are you saying today that you will take control of the entire 26-mile Gaza Strip, as it was 20 years ago to this month in 2005?
Well, we don't want to keep it. We want to have a security perimeter. We don't want to govern it. We don't want to be there as a governing body. We want to hand it over to Arab forces that will govern it properly.
Recent analyses and revelations from the sources we've examined suggest that AIPAC operates in ways that raise some serious questions. Questions about its status, specifically as a potential unregistered foreign agent.
Right. And the concern is that it might be exerting significant influence on U.S. politics and policy, but perhaps without the transparency mandated for foreign actors.
Exactly. So our mission today is really to unpack this intricate web. We'll explore the alleged activities that have drawn this scrutiny, look at its financial strategies, particularly in U.S. elections.
Which are quite significant.
Very significant, yes. And also the ways in which sources accuse it of, well, exerting pressure on members of Congress.
At its heart, the issue is how an organization, while very much asserting its American identity, is alleged by these sources to be acting essentially as a de facto agent of a foreign government.
And potentially shaping U.S. policy without that level of transparency the law requires.
It's fascinating, really, when you start to look into how an organization can reportedly amass such significant power and seemingly navigate around laws, or at least the spirit of laws, designed specifically to ensure transparency in foreign influence.
So this deep dive, our aim is to provide you, the listener, with specific examples, some historical context, things that might really reshape your understanding of the different forces at play in Washington policymaking.
Yeah, you'll gain some crucial insights into the alleged mechanisms of influence and, importantly, the stakes involved for the integrity of American democracy itself.
Which brings us to the crucial question then, how? How has this organization reportedly managed to wield such, well, profound power, often it seems, out of public sight?
And what specific regulations is it accused of circumventing? That's really the core of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we start?
Well, to really grasp the central discussion around AIPAC, we first need to talk about ERA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act.
ERA. Okay, I've heard of it, but give us the rundown.
Sure. So ERA was enacted way back in 1938. Its original purpose was very specific: countering propaganda and influence operations, particularly from Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, right here in the U.S.
So a wartime measure, essentially, or pre-war, rather.
Pre-war, exactly. And its mandate is quite clear. ERA requires any entity acting as an agent of a foreign principal. That's the key phrase.
Agent of a foreign principal.
Meaning, if it engages in political activities in the U.S. at the direction or request or under the control of a foreign government, it must register with the Department of Justice.
Well, we can safely say that Israel has violated that one.
Okay, registration. What does that involve?
It involves public disclosure. That's the essence. These entities have to openly reveal who they're talking to, their contacts with foreign principals, their specific activities, and very importantly, their funding. Where the money comes from, where it goes.
And of course, Israel don't want any of that information getting out, do they? Because if you got looking into that, you'd see that it was stolen taxpayer money used to bribe the politicians.
So it's not just about stopping the activity, it's about knowing who's behind it.
Precisely. The core focus of FAR isn't simply about the source of the money, although that's part of it. It's fundamentally about whose agenda is being pushed. That's the question FAR asks. To make it clearer, our sources use a pretty good analogy. Imagine a group lobbying for, say, Russia.
Okay.
And this group maintained an office in Moscow, funded trips for U.S. officials to Russia, and consistently just parroted Kremlin talking points.
Right, you definitely think that sounds like foreign influence.
Exactly.
And that's because it is.
Most observers, and certainly the framework of AR, would view that as direct foreign influence.
Yeah.
And would absolutely expect that group to register. The whole principle FARI upholds is transparency, letting the American public and policymakers know who is influencing policy and on whose behalf.
To prevent foreign interests from covertly shaping things.
That's the goal, preventing the covert shaping of our national discourse and our legislative outcomes.
Well, I'm going to clue you in right now that has failed miserably.
Okay, so if AIR is so clear about defining foreign agency and requiring this transparency, that leads us straight to the central challenge with AIPAC, right?
Yes.
How has AIPAC reportedly managed to avoid registering under this act for, well, decades?
That's the crux of it.
I'm going with they've bribed, blackmailed, or extorted nearly every single one of them.
Our sources describe AIPAC as having structured itself very cleverly. On the surface, it seems compliant, but the argument is that it essentially evades the spirit of ERBA.
How so?
They claim to be a domestic lobby funded by private donations.
Bullshit.
But the sources we looked at go so far as to label this claim a legal fiction.
A legal fiction. Strong words. What?
That's the critical distinction the sources make.
That's layman terms for it's a fucking lie.
They argue that despite this public assertion of being purely American, funded by Americans, its actual activities, its stated priorities, they align almost perfectly, as the phrase used, with those of the Israeli government.
Almost perfectly.
Yeah.
That's because everybody that hasn't been living under a fucking rock knows exactly who's behind it.
The organization's mission, as described in these reports, is fundamentally about steering U.S. policy toward Israel. So in the eyes of these sources, it functions effectively as a coordinated extension of Israeli interests.
Okay, but is that just a general claim, or are there specifics?
Oh, there are very specific examples the sources highlight to back this up. It's not just a broad statement.
Like what?
For instance, AIPAC has maintained an office in Jerusalem since 1982.
In Jerusalem, an American lobby group.
Yes, which serves, according to sources, as a direct point of contact and coordination with Israeli leadership. That's a pretty direct link.
Okay.
Furthermore, AIPAC leaders frequently travel to Israel for consultations. And conversely, they host Israeli officials at these high-profile policy summits right here in the U.S.
Right, I've seen news about those conferences.
Exactly. And these interactions, the sources contend, consistently aim to align U.S. policy with Israel's specific, often immediate agenda items.
Can you give some concrete policy examples?
Absolutely. Let's look at what the sources cite. Back in 2015, there was a UN resolution condemning Israeli settlements.
I remember that being contentious.
Very. AIPAC strongly opposed it. Their stance precisely mirrored Israel's own defiance on the issue. At the same time, they launched a massive lobbying effort, reportedly spending $30 million to support then Prime Minister Netanyahu's campaign against the Iran nuclear deal.
Which was a huge priority for Netanyahu's government.
A top priority. Fast forward to 2023. AIPAC briefed members of Congress on Israel's Gaza operations. Reports indicated their talking points closely echoed those coming from the Israeli military.
So aligning messaging during a conflict.
Yes. And then in 2024, it actively pushed for $14.1 billion in emergency aid for Israel. That figure directly corresponded to Netanyahu's public demands. And another example, they followed a request from Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, to secure congressional sanctions against the International Criminal Court.
So multiple instances across different areas, UN, Iran, Gaza aid, international courts.
Exactly. When you view these actions collectively, these consistent high-level interventions, the tight alignment with Israeli government positions across so many critical policy areas, our sources present this as compelling evidence. Evidence that the organization is operating, in practice, as a de facto agent of a foreign government, regardless of how it's legally structured.
So it comes back to that Pharaoh question. Whose agenda is being pushed?
Precisely. And these examples, according to the sources, seem to provide a clear answer to that question.
Okay, so if this pattern of alleged activity is happening, what does it really mean for the public's understanding? Who's influencing our policies if an organization can reportedly operate so openly on behalf of a foreign government, but stay unregistered under a law designed for exactly this kind of transparency?
It creates a significant gap in understanding.
And this alleged circumvention, it's not just about legal definitions or technicalities, is it? It seems to lead directly into the whole issue of money in politics. Specifically, the staggering financial power AIPAC reportedly wields in U.S. elections.
Yes, the financial aspect is a huge part of this story, especially in recent years.
Let's get into that, the money trail.
The sources really highlight a radically changed financial approach by AIPAC, particularly in the last 4 years or so. It's a major strategic shift.
How so? What changed?
Well, historically, AIPAC made a point of not having its own political action committee.
Really? Why not? Most lobby groups do.
They deliberately eschewed it, as one source put it. The idea was to maintain this image, this facade, of focusing purely on the legislative agenda, on policy, rather than getting directly involved in partisan politics or electioneering.
So influencing laws, not picking winners and losers in elections.
That was the stated approach. It allowed them to claim a focus on policy over candidate selection. But according to our sources, that strategy completely went out the window.
What prompted the change?
The sources point directly to the rising influence of progressive Democratic candidates. Think of figures often called the squad. They started introducing a much more critical perspective on Israeli policies into the congressional discourse. This was something new, a direct challenge to what the sources describe as an almost scripted pro-Israel agenda.
An agenda previously enforced how?
According to the sources, it was enforced, or at least heavily encouraged, by millions in pro-Israel campaign cash flowing to supportive candidates over the years.
So the new strategy was a reaction to this challenge.
Exactly. The new, much more aggressive approach became clear. Actively work to defeat these progressive candidates, specifically in the primaries.
Ah, primaries. Why primaries?
To prevent them from securing what would otherwise be sure victories in their urban safe seats in Democratic strongholds. If you can defeat them in the primary, they never make it to the general election, where they'd likely win easily.
So it's about shaping the party from within before the general election even happens.
Precisely. This tactical pivot shows a calculated move to proactively shape the composition of the Democratic caucus itself, not just lobbying those already elected, but targeting the very selection of who gets elected in the first place.
And the scale of this financial intervention. You said it was remarkable.
Truly remarkable, according to the reports. We're talking about deploying a formidable financial machine designed explicitly to shape the political landscape.
How does that machine work?
Well, AIPAC didn't just tweak its strategy. It created and leveraged powerful political action committees, PACs.
The ones it previously avoided.
Yes. The sources point to the creation of two major PACs, notably with names like United Democracy Project and Democratic Majority for Israel.
Those names. They sound pretty general, even pro-Democrat.
Exactly. The sources note that significantly these names sounded like they supported Democratic Party candidates, potentially creating a veil, or at least some confusion, about their specific core agenda. And on top of those, AIPAC also created its own direct AIPAC PAC.
So a multi-pronged approach.
A very well-funded one. The sources are quite explicit. These entities function as money machines. And interestingly, they're described as being funded largely by Republican billionaires.
Republican billionaires funding PACs aimed at Democratic primaries.
That's what the sources allege. But strategically designed to defeat any Democrats who were too independent of AIPAC, meaning those critical of Israeli policy.
And the spending level?
Immense. For the current election cycle, the plan reported in these sources is for these three PACs to spend nearly $100 million.
$100 million.
Nearly $100 million. And almost all of it specifically directed at Democratic primaries.
Wow. That's a staggering amount focused on internal party contests.
It reveals a very deep focus. It's also worth noting the broader picture of their giving. Our sources indicate that the Republican Congressional Caucus is seen as almost entirely pro-Israel.
Okay.
And AIPAC has donated to 106 GOP House members, including, the sources point out, some who voted to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
So supporting pro-Israel stances across the aisle, even where there are other major political disagreements.
It suggests a broad strategic alignment where the pro-Israel stance is the key factor being rewarded, regardless of party or other positions.
You mentioned super PACs like United Democracy Project. Can you explain independent expenditures? That term comes up a lot.
Yes, it's crucial here. Independent expenditures, often abbreviated as i.e. spend, are things like campaign ads or mailers that explicitly advocate for electing or defeating a candidate.
Yeah.
But crucially, they're made without any coordination, legally speaking, with the candidate's actual campaign.
And why is that important?
Because super PACs can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money on these independent expenditures. There are no caps like there are for direct contributions to candidates.
Unlimited spending.
Unlimited. And often, the identity of the original donors to the super PAC can be opaque, hidden behind layers of organizations.
So huge sums of money influencing races, and the public might not even know who's ultimately paying for it.
That's the potential issue. This combination of unlimited spending and potential anonymity is what makes this aspect of the alleged strategy so potent. And according to these sources, potentially problematic for democratic transparency.
Okay, so with nearly $100 million reportedly in play, a sum that could absolutely swing elections, who exactly is being targeted? What's the rationale?
The sources describe a very specific and frankly aggressive strategy.
Which is?
To deliberately target the progressive candidates it either hates the most or who are the most vulnerable. It's quite blunt.
Hates the most or most vulnerable, so very targeted.
Very. And this targeting isn't just about challenging incumbents they dislike. It also involves significant spending in open seats races where there's no incumbents.
Why open seat?
To ensure that pro-Israel House members are elected right from the start. It's about preventing critical voices from even entering Congress in the first place. The approach is described as surgical and systematic.
Is there a pattern to who gets targeted?
The sources suggest there is. Past targets have included African Americans, Muslim Americans, LGBTQ individuals, and women. but it's not solely based on identity politics in that sense.
How do you mean?
Strikingly, the sources highlight cases where 2 Jewish candidates were targeted and ultimately defeated, one in Michigan, one in California.
Jewish candidates targeted by a pro-Israel group. Why?
Because they were deemed too critical of Israel. It underscores that the litmus test appears to be alignment on policy towards Israel, above all else.
Can you give an example?
A really poignant one cited is former Representative Andy Levin from Michigan. He comes from a storied family. Politically speaking, his father and uncle were both long-serving members of Congress, deep Democratic roots.
Right.
Yet he was defeated in his primary. The sources describe how the airwaves were showered with $8 million worth of attack ads funded by AIPAC-affiliated groups.
$8 million in one primary against an incumbent from a well-known family.
Yes. It demonstrates a real willingness to invest heavily to remove perceived dissenters, no matter their background or political standing.
And you mentioned the Jamal Bowman case as maybe the most detailed example.
Yes, the race in New York's 16th congressional district involving Jamal Bowman is perhaps the starkest illustration of this strategy in action, according to the reports. You can walk us through the specifics there.
Right. So Jamal Bowman, an African-American progressive, he first won his primary back in 2020, defeated a long-term incumbent by a pretty solid 15-point margin. His district covers a mixed minority urban areas and also some wealthy white suburbs.
The diverse district.
Very. But our sources contend that the pro-Israel lobby, specifically AIPAC and its allies, was not about to let him slip through their fingers this time in the next cycle.
Meaning they targeted him for defeat.
Explicitly. The sources say they actively recruited a challenger, a white moderate pro-Israel candidate, George Latimer.
Okay.
And the money involved in that single primary race, it's just mind-boggling. The pro-Israel lobby reportedly spent around $25 million.
$25 million in one House primary.
Yes. Outspending Bowman by a ratio of about 10 to 1.
10 to 1. That's overwhelming.
Completely. And the outcome, Bowman lost. The sources attribute this loss, quote, largely in part due to AIPAC's role in suppressing the vote of progressives and Black and Latino voters in the district.
How did they allegedly suppress the vote?
Through mudslinging and attack ads against Bowman, focusing on other issues, sowing doubt. The United Democracy Project, just one of AIPAC's super PACs, spent $14.6 million itself in that single race.
$14.6 million from just one super PAC.
Just one. When you add up all the lobby money Latimer received or benefited from, it was over $19 million total. And over $16 million of that was independent expenditures from AIPAC, UDP, DMFI, NORPAC, and JC. Those are other pro-Israel PACs.
It's an extraordinary level of financial intervention in one primary, allegedly designed clearly to change the Democratic outcome.
It really highlights the scale we're talking about.
And it wasn't just Bowman. As you said, this reflects a broader pattern detailed in our sources.
Yeah.
We don't need to list every single figure for every race, but the reports give numerous examples. Multi-million-dollar campaigns influencing primaries across the country. Cori Bush in Missouri, reportedly defeated with significant help from these groups.
Okay.
Maxine Dexter beating Sushila Jayapal in Oregon after a big last-minute spending blitz, again with AIPAC involved in the independent expenditures. Wesley Bell's primary in Missouri saw over $12 million in total lobby money from various pro-Israel groups, with about $9 million just in independent spending against his opponents.
It's consistent.
Very consistent. Chantel Brown in Ohio, over $3 million in IE spending from AIPAC and DMFI. Valerie Fauci in North Carolina, Don Davis, also in North Carolina, millions flowed into their campaigns or against their opponents from these PACs.
We're seeing a pattern state after state.
Exactly. Janelle Bynum in Oregon.
Yeah.
Henry Queller in Texas. Substantial independent expenditures from groups like Democratic Majority for Israel and AIPAC itself. These examples, taken together, illustrate this consistent multi-million-dollar scale. Targeted campaigns, race after race, demonstrating what sources call a clear and effective strategy of financial intervention designed to shape Congress.
So it's not just the sheer amount of money, the financial might. The methods used by these PACs you mentioned are also a concern, according to the sources, sometimes described as deceptive.
Yes, that's a key point in the reports. AIPAC's affiliated PACs are often described as largely opaque.
Opaque how?
Meaning their donor identities can be unreported or hard to trace, making it difficult for voters to know who's really funding these massive campaigns. And the campaign methods themselves are frequently called deceptive.
What's deceptive about them?
What's particularly striking, according to the sources, is the content of the ads. These negative ads flood the airwaves, the mailboxes, online platforms.
Right.
But they almost never address Israel's occupation of Palestine, or even the candidate's stance on Israel-Palestine issues, which is often the core reason the candidate is being targeted in the first place.
So what do they attack them on?
They attack their targets on local issues, things like crime, maybe their voting record, on economic policy, healthcare stances, whatever they think will resonate negatively in that specific district. The goal is to sow doubt and mistrust among voters about the candidate's overall fitness or alignment with local concerns.
Diverting attention from the real reason for the opposition.
That's the argument. And the ads are almost always negative and against the progressive candidate. They rarely promote AIPAC's preferred candidate directly through these independent expenditures.
Just tear down the opponent.
Exactly. The ultimate goal, as the sources state very clearly, is simply to discourage voters from choosing the targeted one, make them seem unelectable or untrustworthy.
And this must have a chilling effect.
A significant chilling effect on the democratic process, the sources argue. Other candidates, other incumbents, they see what happens to colleagues who step out of line. They might feel compelled to align with AIPAC's agenda just to avoid facing this kind of onslaught, just to secure funding or at least neutrality.
Which means less genuine policy debate.
Potentially, yes. It limits genuine debate if candidates are afraid to voice critical perspectives for fear of massive financial retribution that can drown out their message on all other issues.
So when we put together these huge financial interventions and these allegedly deceptive tactics, what are the broader implications? For the political parties, sure, but mainly for the average voter. For you listening.
The sources contend there are significant negative repercussions beyond just defeating specific candidates. First, they argue that dumping tens of millions into these primaries portrays the party as one that is up for sale to the highest bidder.
Which erodes trust.
Exactly. It erodes public trust and can lead to widespread voter disillusionment, cynicism about the whole process.
And second,
and perhaps even more critically for election outcomes, it potentially discourages these voters from turning out for more important races later on. Think about the context of a major national election, like the presidential race. Our sources note, for example, that a candidate like President Biden desperately needs the Democrats' core constituency of working-class and minority voters to go to the polls. Their turnout is crucial.
Right, especially in swing states.
Absolutely. Without that base, the presidency could be lost. Yet, the sources are quite blunt here. They state AIPAC will not be spending $100 million to get Biden elected.
They won't use that war chest for the general election top of the ticket.
No. The sources contend these groups don't care who wins this critical race, the presidency, because a Trump victory will bring an even more craven pro-Israel candidate to the White House. That's a direct quote reflecting the sources' perspective on their priorities.
So the massive spending isn't about the party winning overall, but about controlling the party's stance on one specific issue.
That's the argument. This massive spending is meant to quell the liberal rebellion on Israel policy, impose a pro-Israel agenda on the Democratic caucus, and warn those who think to stray. It's about internal control.
The sources even suggest a takeover.
Yes, they use the phrase, a not-so-subtle takeover of the Democratic Party itself, aiming to cultivate an obedient Democratic congressional caucus on issues related to Israel. The strategy is designed to ensure the party's legislative priorities align with AIPAC's agenda, regardless of what the broader electorate or even party members might think.
So if that's the case, what does this mean for you, the voter? When the priorities of such a powerful, well-funded lobby seem to outweigh the diverse priorities of the actual electorate.
It creates a significant disconnect.
How?
The sources are very clear that the specific issue at the heart of the pro-Israel lobby's efforts barely registers as a priority for most voters. People are far more concerned about bread-and-butter issues like jobs, healthcare, and crime.
That seems intuitive.
It is. And this disconnect is highlighted further by data within the sources suggesting that even among American Jews, less than 10% place Israel as one of their top 2 voting priorities.
Less than 10%.
Yes. So this alleged distortion of political priorities, prioritizing this one issue so heavily through massive spending when it's not a top concern for most voters, including many Jewish voters, is presented as a striking consequence of this unchecked financial influence.
And it's not just about money and ads, right? The sources allege even more direct tactics are used. Coercive tactics.
Yes, beyond the financial campaigns, AIPAC reportedly employs, or is alleged to employ, tactics that sources describe as moving into bribery, blackmail, and coercion to ensure compliance from members of Congress.
Okay, that's a serious allegation. Let's get into that. Bribery, blackmail, coercion, where does that start?
One area the sources point to repeatedly is the practice of funding congressional trips to Israel.
Ah, yes, the trips. I've heard about those.
They're typically organized and funded through AIPAC's legally distinct nonprofit arm, the American Israel Education Foundation, or AIE.
A separate foundation handles it.
Yes, which provides a layer of separation. But these trips are a major point of contention and described as a key mechanism of influence.
How are they described?
Well, they're often officially framed as educational excursions, fostering understanding, seeing things firsthand.
Sounds reasonable.
But our sources explicitly characterize them quite differently. They call them propaganda exercises, where lawmakers are indoctrinated with pro-Israel narratives.
Propaganda exercises, that's strong.
It is, and the sheer volume is significant. These trips are consistently the #1 destination for privately sponsored foreign travel by members of the House and their aides year after year.
#1 destination, more than any other country.
By far, according to the data cited. The scale and frequency suggest, to these sources, a very deliberate and pervasive effort to shape perspectives, cultivate loyalty, especially among new policymakers, right from the start of their careers.
Is there evidence of this indoctrination aspect?
Well, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene offered a quite vivid personal account, which the sources highlight.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, what did she say?
She explained that AIPAC takes every single freshman member of Congress their first year on what she called a very special trip to Israel in August during the congressional recess.
Every freshman member.
That was her claim. She said she personally refused to go, but she noted seeing images of others, like Speaker Mike Johnson and other members, at the Wailing Wall, and she specifically mentioned them adorning Jewish attire, like the kippah, even though they aren't Jewish. For the sources citing this, her account illustrates the intended political and cultural immersion. It's presented not just as tourism, but as a structured experience designed to build a strong pro-Israel alignment, shape perspectives from the very beginning. The argument is these aren't just neutral educational tours, but carefully curated immersions aimed at generating unwavering support.
Okay, so the trips are one alleged tool of influence. What about the more severe claims, like blackmail or coercion?
This is where it gets even more concerning, according to the reports. Sources allege that AIPAC employs sophisticated profiling techniques.
Profiling members of Congress.
Yes, to identify the weaknesses of congressional members and exploit them for political gain. That's a direct quote reflecting the source's claim.
Weaknesses, like what kind of weaknesses?
It could be anything, theoretically. Personal vulnerabilities, maybe financial difficulties, perhaps past indiscretions, even just a tough re-election race, making them anxious. The idea alleged is that by understanding these pressure points, AIPAC can tailor its approach to ensure maximum influence.
That sounds invasive.
The implications are quite severe. The sources go so far as to suggest this could potentially include using personal information to blackmail or coerce members into supporting pro-Israel legislation, regardless of its impact on U.S. interests.
Blackmail, that's a huge accusation.
It is. And if true, it moves far beyond legitimate lobbying into deeply unethical, potentially illegal territory. It raises fundamental questions about a representative's independence. Can they make decisions based on their constituents' best interests, or are they voting under duress?
It undermines the whole idea of representation if their personal lives become leverage.
Precisely. If a legislator's vote could be influenced by personal leverage, it shakes the very foundation of representative democracy.
And what happens to members who don't go along, who resist this pressure or the party line AIPAC promotes?
The consequences, as alleged by the sources, are swift and severe for those who do not toe the line.
Like what? We talked about primary challenges.
Yes, that's the most common and visible form of retribution, being targeted by AIPAC-funded opponents in their next election. We saw the multi-million-dollar examples like Bowman and Levin. That's very real.
But does it go beyond election challenges?
According to some reports cited in our sources, yes. They mention threats escalating even further, including members being targeted with dangerous fake emergency calls to police designed to provoke a large police response at their homes, a practice known as swatting.
Swatting, that's incredibly dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. And other forms of harassment are also mentioned. This clearly moves significantly beyond normal political campaigning or lobbying. It creates, allegedly, a climate of actual fear for dissenters.
So it's not just their careers at risk, but potentially their personal safety.
That's the implication drawn by these sources. It makes the cost of opposition incredibly high, potentially impacting their ability to even function effectively as representatives, let alone challenge the established line on this issue. The examples of Bowman and Levin stand as stark reminders of the very real financial and political consequences.
Okay, so when you combine this immense financial power, the primary challenges, with these alleged coercive tactics, the profiling, the threats, you start to see how the sources build the argument that AI PAC's influence goes beyond just lobbying. They argue it extends to actually, quote, hijacking the legislative agenda of Congress itself.
That is precisely the conclusion drawn in several of the sources we reviewed. The claim is that AI PAC's influence, through this multi-layered strategy, effectively extends to hijacking congressional agendas.
How does that manifest in practice?
Through its extensive lobbying efforts and financial clout. The argument goes, AI PAC ensures that pro-Israel legislation is prioritized. Often, the sources claim, at the expense of other critical issues facing the country.
So it's about what gets attention, what gets resources.
Exactly. This prioritization has very tangible consequences. The sources point again to the idea that billions flow to Israel each year, while domestic crises like healthcare languish here at home. It's presented as a direct trade-off.
Beyond just the big aid packages.
Yes. AI PAC also actively pushes for specific legislation favored by the Israeli government, like anti-BDS laws. BDS being the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement aimed at pressuring Israel economically. Passing laws against BDS mirrors Israeli priorities, and of course they consistently work to secure billions in annual aid.
And this happens without much debate sometimes.
Often these measures proceed with surprisingly little robust debate, especially considering the amounts involved or the policy implications. This, the sources argue, indicates a deeply embedded influence on the setting of legislative priorities.
You mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene earlier, her attempt to cut some funding.
Yes, that's a stark example. She tried to strip $500 million in U.S. funding, specifically for Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system.
What was her reasoning?
She framed it explicitly as being about protecting U.S. interests. She argued, we don't have time to fund what you're doing when facing domestic challenges. Purely about prioritizing American resources, she claimed.
And how did that go?
It failed. Dramatically. The vote in the House was 422-6 against her amendment.
422-6.
Wow, an overwhelming margin. For the sources, this starkly illustrates the depth of pro-Israel prioritization within Congress. It shows how incredibly difficult it is to challenge this agenda, even when the argument is framed around American resources and domestic needs. It reveres, they argue, a profound level of control over the legislative process itself on this issue.
So when these sources argue that our representatives are prioritizing policies that potentially put U.S. interests second, what does that mean for the average person, for the legislative landscape overall? And you said this control isn't just quiet lobbying, it's also very public.
Yes, alongside the behind-the-scenes work, there are these highly visible public campaigns. The sources specifically describe AI PAC's frequent fly-ins.
Fly-ins, what are those?
That's where activists descend on Capitol Hill, often hundreds or even thousands at a time, specifically to lobby Congress members and their staff on pro-Israel policies.
So mobilizing their grassroots.
Exactly. But these aren't just casual constituent visits. The reports describe them as highly coordinated events, meticulously planned to maximize impact.
Coordinated how?
Everyone often has the same talking points. Visits are scheduled strategically. And the sources allege these events can sometimes involve intimidation tactics to pressure lawmakers into supporting AI PAC's agenda.
Intimidation.
Imagine waves of activists, all repeating the same synchronized messages, filling the hallways, packing meeting rooms. It creates an intense, overwhelming presence in congressional offices. The sheer volume and coordination can make it incredibly difficult for lawmakers or staff to consider alternative viewpoints or even just push back gently. It generates this palpable sense of pervasive, unwavering support for AI PAC's line.
Amplifying influence through organized presence.
Yes, a very direct and impactful form of alleged influence, ensuring the message isn't just heard, but felt acutely by representatives and their teams.
And to make sure that message isn't effectively challenged, the messaging itself, you mentioned earlier, it's carefully constructed to suppress dissent.
Absolutely. That's a crucial element, according to the sources. The propaganda, as they term it, disseminated during these events and in their broader communications, is often designed to paint any criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic.
The anti-Semitism charge.
Yes, which is described as a way to further stifle dissent. It's a particularly powerful and sensitive tactic. Robert Kuttner, writing in the American Prospect and cited in our sources, argued that this tactic reinforce the ancient blood libel that Jews have dual loyalty.
That's a very serious historical accusation,
Well, this
blood
is
libel.
extremely serious.
Yeah.
It's a false and deeply anti-Semitic trope used for centuries to incite hatred. Quetner's point, as interpreted by our source material, is that conflating criticism of Israeli government policy with anti-Semitism echoes this harmful idea of questioning Jewish citizens' loyalty to their own countries. The sources argue that this slander, that to be critical of Netanyahu is to be an anti-Semite, talks even louder than the money itself.
Creating an environment where legitimate policy disagreement becomes toxic.
That's the alleged effect. It reframes policy debate as bigotry. We saw this dynamic potentially at play even with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She insisted she was not anti-Israel, but radically and unapologetically for America. Yet she faced overwhelming opposition when challenging funding, despite framing it around U.S. interests.
Illustrating the power of that accusation to shut down debate.
The sources use it as an example of how effective that charge can be in silencing critical voices, even from unexpected parts of the political spectrum. When such a powerful tactic is deployed, it raises profound questions about free speech, critical thinking, and the possibility of nuanced policy discussion in U.S. politics.
So how did AIPAC reach this position, this level of alleged influence, reportedly operating outside Aviar scrutiny for so long? To understand that, we need to look back, right, at the history.
Yes, the history is key to understanding the current situation, particularly the legal maneuvering involved.
Let's get into that history of evasion, the legal loopholes, the hidden ties alleged by the sources. Where does the story start?
It starts, according to these accounts, before AIPAC even existed in its current form. It starts with its predecessor organization, the American Zionist Council, or AZC.
Okay, the AZC. What's significant about them?
What's highly significant is that the AZC was ordered to register under FERA in 1962 by the U.S. government.
Ordered to register as a foreign agent. Why?
Because the Justice Department, after an investigation, found that the AZC was essentially funneling millions from Israel's Jewish Agency, an arm of the Israeli government at the time, specifically to lobby Congress.
So direct foreign government funding for lobbying activities.
Exactly. It wasn't ambiguous. The finding was that they were receiving substantial funding and directives from abroad to influence U.S. policy. This directly met the criteria FERA was designed to address. It established a clear legal precedent. These kinds of activities constitute foreign agency under U.S. law.
Okay, so a clear precedent was set with the predecessor organization. How, then, did AIPAC avoid the same fate? What does this mean for their claims of being purely domestic?
Well, the response to that 1962 order against AZC was immediate, and, as the sources strongly suggest, a very calculated legal maneuver.
What did they do?
Instead of the AZC complying with the FER registration order, Isaiah Keenan, who is a key figure in AZC, essentially shut it down and immediately relaunched it as AIPAC in 1963.
Relaunched it under a new name.
A new name, and crucially, a slightly different structure. The sources say Keenan was dodging the law by using U.S. donors.
Ah, so shifting the funding source, at least on paper.
Precisely. This structural shift was the key. By presenting the new entity, AIPAC, as an organization funded solely by American citizens, they could argue it was purely domestic. Even if its mission, its goals, its close alignment with Israeli interests remained virtually identical to the AZC's.
Exploiting a loophole.
Effectively, yes. It allowed AIPAC to argue it fell outside the interpretation of AFAIR at the time, which focused heavily on the direct source of funds. This established a crucial loophole. And over the decades, our sources add, AIPAC has also benefited from political donors who are reluctant to fund groups registered under AFAIR.
Why would donors be reluctant?
AFAIR registration can carry a perceived stigma for some, or simply involves a level of public scrutiny and disclosure that major donors might prefer to avoid. This donor preference further entrenched AIPAC's unregistered status, allowing it to operate, the sources claim, with a significant lack of transparency compared to registered foreign agents.
So it wasn't just this initial legal maneuver, but ongoing factors reinforcing the unregistered status. Do the sources point to other things beyond that initial structuring, more direct ties or activities that fuel the foreign agent argument?
Yes. The sources detail several historical incidents over the years that, they argue, paint a consistent picture of AIPAC's alleged deep ties to the Israeli government and systematic efforts to conceal them or manage the risk of ARA exposure.
Like what?
For example, there are declassified FBI files from 1984. These reportedly reveal AIPAC's early collaboration with Israel's Ministry of Economics.
Collaboration on what?
Specifically, the files allege AIPAC was using stolen U.S. trade data, provided by Israel, to shape the U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement.
Stolen U.S. trade data? That sounds serious.
Extremely. The source explicitly calls this an act of espionage, not advocacy. That's a very strong accusation, linking the organization directly to intelligence activities for a foreign government, far beyond legitimate lobbying.
Okay, what else?
Then, much more recently, in 2005, there was that high-profile case involving two senior AI PAC staffers, Stephen Rosen and Keith Weissman.
I remember that. What were the allegations?
They allegedly passed classified Pentagon data to Israeli officials. Now, the charges against them were eventually dropped by the Justice Department.
Right, the charges were dropped.
They were. But the incident itself, regardless of the legal outcome, highlighted for many observers a concerning level of access AI PACs seem to have to sensitive U.S. government information and a relationship with Israeli officials that appeared to go well beyond typical advocacy work.
And any other examples?
Perhaps one of the most revealing, according to the sources, comes from leaked documents from the Israeli Justice Ministry itself dating to 2018.
Documents from Israel's government, what did they show?
They reportedly show Jerusalem's worry that AI PAC's advocacy could trigger ARA scrutiny, internal concern within the Israeli government about AI PAC's status. And these documents apparently prompted internal plans to conceal ties with the U.S. nonprofit.
Israel's government planning to conceal ties to avoid fairer scrutiny for AI PAC.
That's what the leaked documents reportedly show. And this pattern is what the sources emphasize. If AI PAC's work is truly and purely domestic, why would Israel's own Justice Ministry worry about FARA? Why would they plan to conceal ties? The consistent efforts over decades, whether avoiding the initial registration or allegedly obscuring connections, later raise fundamental questions for these sources about AI PAC's true nature and the actual extent of its foreign influence.
Okay, so bringing all this together, the history, the alleged financial influence, the reported tactics, the FERA questions, it leads us to the bottom line, right? What are the stakes here? What are the consequences of this alleged unchecked influence for American democracy itself, and what can be done about it, according to those concerned?
That really is the ultimate question. The sources we examine frame the overarching problem like this. AI PAC's alleged unchecked influence skews U.S. policy. Skews it in a way that prioritizes Israeli interests, potentially over those of the American people.
And that's not just about money, you're saying?
No, according to these reports, it goes much deeper than just campaign contributions or lobbying budgets. It impacts the fundamental direction of U.S. foreign policy, how vast taxpayer resources are allocated, and potentially even U.S. national security.
National security? How?
The sources recall, for instance, General David Petraeus' warning back in 2010. He reportedly told the Senate Armed Services Committee that the perceived alignment of the U.S. with Israeli actions, an alignment amplified by AI PAC, was creating anti-American sentiment and putting U.S. troops in the Middle East at risk.
A former top general linking AI PAC's influence to risks for U.S. soldiers.
Yes, that directly connects the alleged influence to potential U.S. national security concerns. The argument is that U.S. policy, if heavily influenced by a foreign-aligned lobby, might not always align with the safety and strategic interests of its own personnel.
And the resource allocation.
We touched on it before, but the sources reiterate. Billions flow to Israel each year, while domestic crises like healthcare languish here at home. It's presented as a direct trade-off, impacting the lives of American citizens.
So without a FARA registration?
Without fair registration, the sources contend we remain blind to how much Israel shapes these decisions or what AI PAC is hiding. We lack the transparency to fully assess the influence. And this lack of transparency, they argue, contributes to a form of democratic erosion, a situation where the will of the people, the independent judgment of representatives, might be compromised by undisclosed foreign influence, preventing an honest public evaluation of whose interests are truly being served.
So if that's the alleged problem, what's the remedy? What solutions are proposed for this situation, which one source even called a scourge?
The fundamental remedy proposed across the board in these sources comes back to transparency. And the primary tool for that is ARA.
Registration under FARA.
Yes. The key point made is that FARA doesn't prohibit lobbying, it requires openness. Registration isn't a ban, it's a disclosure requirement.
What would disclosure entail for AI PAC?
It would compel AI PAC to publicly reveal its meetings with Israeli officials, spending details and directives it might receive or coordinate on. Full transparency.
And the argument is, if they have nothing to hide.
Exactly. The question posed is, if AI PAC is truly just merely Americans supporting Israel, then why resist this disclosure? Why fight transparency so hard? Refusing it the sources argue, inherently raises questions about whose interests it truly serves and naturally fosters suspicion instead of public confidence.
Are there other solutions proposed besides AI registration?
Yes, some sources suggest more direct actions within the political parties themselves, particularly the Democratic Party, given AI PAC's heavy spending in their primaries.
Like what?
Ideas like the Democratic Party leadership finding ways to make receipt of AI PAC funds radioactive for candidates, basically creating a stigma around taking that money, and urging national party committees need to support incumbents against AI PAC-backed challengers rather than stay neutral in those primaries.
Actively counteracting the primary strategy.
Yes. And Larry Cohen of Our Revolution, cited in the sources, points to another potential avenue. He notes that dark and dirty money in Democratic Party primaries is currently unregulated by the 57 state and territorial parties.
Unregulated by the parties themselves?
Yes. He suggests state parties should consider their options because the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, which opened the floodgates for independent expenditures, doesn't apply directly to the internal workings of political parties. So there might be room for state parties to impose their own regulations on this kind of spending within their primaries.
Interesting. So multiple angles being proposed to push back.
Yes, aiming to counter the alleged financial influence and restore some measure of accountability and transparency.
Now, despite this picture of pervasive influence and the challenges involved, there are signs of resistance, right? Voices pushing back.
Absolutely. It's important to note that the Reject AI PAC campaign is a significant example mentioned in the sources.
What is Reject AI PAC?
It's described as a broad coalition of progressive groups working together to take on the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AI PAC, and its affiliated dark money super PACs. It's an organized countereffort.
And what are they doing?
Their campaign highlights what they say is a growing number of members of Congress and congressional candidates who are proudly rejecting AI PAC and its dangerous far-right agenda. They're making it a public stance.
Can you name some of those members?
Yes, the sources list several who have been tracked as taking this stance, part of what they call the Track AI PAC approved list, meaning those rejecting their influence. People like Maxwell Frost, Delia Ramirez, Jesus Chuy Garcia, Andre Carson, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley.
So many prominent progressives.
Yes, and others like Nydia Velázquez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Senators Chris Van Hollen, Jeff Merkley, Bernie Sanders, Peter Welch, and Representatives Becca Balint, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan. It's a noticeable group within Congress actively resisting.
Showing it's possible to get elected and serve while opposing AI PAC's line.
It demonstrates visible, active resistance. And it's worth recalling, again, Marjorie Taylor Greene's criticisms from the other side of the aisle about Israel's incredible influence and control, noting her public stance as another, albeit very different, voice in this growing chorus of dissent.
So it raises a final question, really.
Which is?
Will this increasing scrutiny, this growing public awareness, these calls for transparency from various quarters, will it finally compel AI PAC to register under FARA? Or will the legal loopholes and the established influence continue to operate, leaving us, as the sources contend, somewhat blind to the full extent of alleged foreign influence, potentially undermining aspects of American democracy?
That is indeed the critical question moving forward.
Well, today we've certainly taken a deep dive into the very complex world surrounding AI PAC. We've explored the serious accusations that it operates as an unregistered foreign agent, examined its vast financial strategies in U.S. elections, looked at the alleged coercive tactics reportedly used on members of Congress, and traced the historical context of its long-standing alleged evasion of FARA. The sources we've explored, taken together, they paint a picture of an organization that has, they claim, systematically influenced U.S. policy in ways that prioritize foreign interests, all while reportedly operating outside the transparency laws specifically designed to prevent such a scenario.
So how does it make you feel, knowing the U.S. government has been hijacked by a foreign agent?
That's a provocative closing thought based on the sources.
Well, this exploration, it really isn't just about abstract politics, is it? It's about the transparency, the integrity of the democratic process, something that impacts every single one of us. We hope you'll consider how these insights drawn from the sources we discussed might deepen your understanding of the many influences shaping policy in Washington and how that affects our democracy. We encourage you to reflect on these dynamics, maybe explore further on your own.
So I've heard that anti-Semitism is on the rise on X and across various social media platforms as a result of right-wing internet influencers propagating a conspiracy theory claiming that the American government is occupied and controlled by Israel. Is it really a conspiracy theory?
Congressman, my name's Frankie Stocks. I'm a reporter with the Stu Peters Network. I would just love to ask you a quick question. I'm trying to ask every representative I can.
Go for it, Frank.
That is, do you care more about the American people or Israel as a member of Congress?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive, Frankie.
Can you elaborate?
They're our best ally.
Are they? Who do you care about more, the United States or Israel? United States or Israel, sir? No answer? Should we put you down for Israel? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? It's an easy one. American people or Israel? You don't got to fake a phone call. American people or Israel? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? The American people or Israel, sir? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? No answer?
I think that Israel is one of our strongest allies in a part of the world where people are trying to harm us, and I think they need our support.
So should the U.S. continue funding Israel? Despite their links to the 9/11 or their attack on the USS Liberty? Who do you care about more, the United States or Israel?
You know what? That's kind of an odd question to ask.
Well, it's a question the American people have been asking a lot because they're starting to wake up to how much AIPAC money is flowing into the coffers of Congress.
Well, if you watch what I've done for the years since I've been here, the question about do we have some strong support for Israel, I think it would be hard to find somebody who's more positive about it than I have. So I'm amazed sometimes at where the American people are and how they think. It's like, this is so against everything I've heard. Military people who raised me everywhere, etc. So.
Well, we have American citizens who are about to freeze to death in Western North Carolina, and we're sending millions to Israel.
No, that's not a comparison.
Well, it is a comparison because the money's going out. It's all coming from the same people. It's coming from the taxpayers, sir. Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? American people or Israel, sir? Sir, they're equal? Are you serving Israel or are you serving America?
I stand with Israel.
Okay, so can you answer the original question? Who do you care about more, U.S. or Israel?
There's no variance. It's like you're asking, do you love your wife more than your daughter?
Well,
and you said it's a simple question.
It is.
Do you love your wife more than your daughter?
I love the United States more than I love Israel. It's a very simple question.
Great love, and you as a human being, you express that love, and you have core principles that drive you to your love for your wife and your love for your daughter. It's two different loves, but neither of them is greater than the other. You understand?
Who's the priority when you're casting a vote in Congress, America or Israel?
Priority is love, son.
Well, it's a very simple question. You're not answering it, Representative. Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? American people or Israel, sir? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? No answer? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? American people or Israel, sir? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? No answer? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? Well, who do you care about more? American people or Israel, sir? Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel? American people or Israel, sir? Is it so hard to say you care about the American people who you're here to serve? The American people believe that Israel holds disproportionate influence over our own government thanks to organizations like AIPAC who are pumping millions of dollars into American politics promoting Israel First policy. So,
if you want to share this information, you're doing a great job.
It's not misinformation. We have the campaign finance report, sir. It's not misinformation. Do you care more about the American people or about Israel?
Where are you from?
The Stu Peters Network. The Stu Peters Show just released a film called Occupied on this very subject, which I highly recommend to look up.
I'll do that.
But can you answer the question, sir? Do you care more about the American people or about Israel?
I'm an American. I care more about the American people.
You care more about the American people? Right, but should Americans take priority over Israel? We know AIPAC's pumping hundreds of thousands of dollars into congressional candidates. They're obviously getting some sway there. Should AIPAC register as a foreign agent?
That's a good question. Don't they already?
No. Yes, sir.
Are you one of those Are you recording?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Stu Peters Network, Frankie Stocks. We're asking the questions that the American people want answered by their representatives.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Make an appointment. Thank you.
Congressman. Quick second. I'm Frankie Stocks with the Stu Peters Network, trying to ask all members I can this question. Very simple. Who do you care about more, the American people or Israel?
American people.
You are the first to have given me that answer, sir. Thank you. Yep.
American people. Number one, man. Always.
So there's your answer right there. They're all fucking traitors. All completely bought, sold, bribed, blackmailed, or extorted. What a wonderful fucking government we have, huh? Hijacked by Israel.